Welcome to Gone Your Soul, a Rites and Rituals podcast. I'm Lindy Irving.
And I'm Helen Parker.
And we are here to talk about ceremony, ritual, spirituality, and maybe even a wee bit of Scottishness thrown in. So thank you for those of you who are tuning in and those of you who have sent messages to say that you're enjoying it or have liked or have subscribed, all those things. Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be back because I missed the last two. I was off doing other things, but the space was held beautifully by some of my lovely colleagues, and you'll notice that the lovely Victoria is not here today, and that's because she's actually out doing what we're talking about. So she's out holding space for a family that are saying farewell to their loved ones. So there's something really nice about that. We're talking about it. She's
doing it in practice.
She is out doing the work. But I'm so excited to be here talking to Helen today because we're going to be talking about something that you guys have already spoken about in a podcast where I couldn't make it, and that's end of life ceremonies, but particularly direct cremations.
Yep.
And that's because I had terrible FOMO when I was watching the episode back, and I was like, oh, I so wish I'd been there, because it's something I feel really strongly about. I know you feel really strongly about.
So. Yep.
I know it was your you brought it to the table because something had happened, and you can share that with us in a minute. But I was really keen to come back because I don't think you can talk too much about it. I think as a society, when it comes to these direct cremations, we need to pause and really think about what we're doing and if it's the right way to go. But before we start, let's just clarify for people what we mean by direct cremation. So, direct cremation is where somebody is cremated without any ceremony. So if you think about usually going along to a crematorium for somebody's died, they're having a cremation, family and friends go along, and there's somebody up the front, whether it's a celebrant, a minister, a member of the family, and they are sharing stories and memories and taking us on a wee walk through that person's life. They maybe share poems and readings and hymns and prayers. It's a community of people that come together, and it really creates a container for grief, for the family's grief, for the mourner's grief. And actually, if it's constructed, if it's put together in the right way, it really helps channel the grief and helps the family move through it just in a kind of more structured way. But if it's a direct cremation, there's none of that. Just the body's taken to the crematorium and is cremated with nobody being there. And it's often marketed as being easier, simpler,
cheaper.
That's a big motivation because it's all over the telly, right? Direct cremations are all over the telly. Cheaper, simpler, but in a very kind of soft, we're helping you kind of way. And this is not a dig at any funeral directors, but we're offering something that's very sort of efficient and simple, and it takes the fuss out of it. And so people see that and people hear that, because there's usually two ways that it ends up being a direct cremation, and that is usually the person themselves has said, when I go, I don't want any fuss, I don't want a big ceremony, I just want a direct cremation. I've seen it in the telly, it's £900, let's go for that. And they're doing that out of love, right?
Yeah.
They don't want to cause their family any more stress.
But they're not aware of other ways that funerals can be financed.
Absolutely. Other ways it can be financed, but also, as we're going to go on to talk about, that it's not the ceremony that costs the money.
Exactly.
But so they're usually doing it from a good place. I don't want to cause my family any unnecessary stress. I don't want to place this huge financial burden on them. I want it to be as simple as possible for them, so we'll just go down that road. But they don't realise what they are giving up on.
No.
In terms of the ceremony and what that can do for the loved ones that's left behind. And so either a person themselves will decide and leave those instructions with their family, or the family decide, somebody dies and maybe they don't have a lot of money, and they decided to go down this direct cremation route. And sometimes, and this is the ones I've been involved in, maybe you've been involved in, the person has said, I don't want to have a ceremony, I want a direct cremation, and the family needs something.
Yes.
The family just can't do it, and they need something. And so you have to bring together the wishes of both. How do we do this in a way that really respects the person who's died and what they wanted? And how do we do this in a way that actually helps the family to process their grief in some way? But so you shared with us what happened that brought direct cremations to the forefront.
Well, it was a few months ago now, and I was out with my dog, and I met a fellow dog walker. And he'd shared with me that a friend he'd had for a long number of years had passed away very unexpectedly. He'd attended hospital routine surgery, and the surgery had sadly gone wrong, and the gentleman passed away unexpectedly. He'd contacted the deceased wife, and who's told him that there was going to be no ceremony because he had opted for a direct cremation. So that generated a conversation with the gentleman and myself. He knows what I do as I'm a celebrant, and he'd said about how cheated he felt. He felt he'd known this man a number of years. He didn't have the chance to say goodbye to him. He'd nowhere to process his grief as a long-standing friend. And he also said that he liked going to other people's funerals because he always felt that you've got to find out something about the deceased that you wouldn't have known beforehand through the eulogy. So we'd spoke about, what he could do as an individual to honour his loved one or his friend's life, such as maybe lighting a candle and writing a letter to him. But he did. He said he would take all these kind of ideas on board, but he still had this essence of feeling really cheated that he couldn't say goodbye to his friends in the conventional's maybe not the right word, but in the time-honoured way of ceremony, coming together, seeing other people, giving a hug, offering condolences to the family. That was all lost to him.
This ancient rite that is so, so important.
Exactly.
And has been important throughout time, and it seems as if, I was going to say we're taking a step back, but we're not taking a step back, because if we take a step back, we find our ancestors treated death with great reverence.
Exactly.
But we seem to be sidestepping it. Mm-hmm. We seem to be, for some reason, and it's a commercial reason, it seems to me, that we're sidestepping the bit that we need as human beings. We need.
Yeah, we need closure. We need to come together as a community. And I think that's the thing, even during the pandemic, when the ceremonies were much smaller, there was that lack of connect, getting a hug from somebody, if you've been bereaved.
As we said earlier, that the community creates that container for grief.
It does.
It holds that family, holds the person as they move on, but it holds the family because often up until that point between the person dying and the funeral itself, sorry, I'm trying to avoid hitting my microphone here, between the person dying and the funeral itself, families don't often get the time or take the time to just sit and just be with the fact that this person's gone. Because they're caught up in so much stuff. They're emptying houses, they're doing paperwork, they're registering stuff, everybody's coming to the door to talk to you. So they get caught up in all the noise, and then it comes to the funeral itself, and that's the time when they kind of land in the knowledge that this person is gone.
Yeah.
And that's their space to just be with that and to let whatever's going to come out.
Yeah, definitely.
And if we're not doing that, if that person's been cremated and their family and friends are just going about their everyday life, we're not pausing for death. We're no stopping. When I talk about weddings, and my couples will know this, I talk about when couples come together in ceremony, it's like the world pausing for them, for that moment, because it's so important. And never is that any more important than, well, there's 2 points, I think, when a child comes into the world, and we are absolutely rubbish at marking that.
We are, aren't we?
And when people die. And we are somewhat better at marking that. I don't think we're all the way there. But if we go back thousands and thousands of years, because there's all this archaeological evidence, right, of these graves being found where it's obvious that death has been treated with great reverence. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't matter whether it was a child. I think I was reading recently about, I think it was something like 75,000 years old grave with a child in it, I think a wee girl. And they could tell that she had been laying on her side, her knees had been brought up to her chest, and she had some sort of headrest. These people took time. These people stopped time to pay reverence to that child who's now gone. We're talking about 75,000 years ago.
Yep.
And there's so much evidence of that. I remember reading, now my memory's no that great, so in fact it's rubbish, but it was another wee girl's grave. Can't remember how old it was, but the wee girl obviously had disabilities. And what the article was saying was this was at a time when that might have been a burden in the community, because it would have taken extra resources to look after her. She wouldn't have been able to hunt or to, look after, to care and do all the things that needed to be done to run a wee community. And yet they still cared for that wee girl greatly and with reverence in death. She was covered in ochre. She was... there was gifts in there. There was, this evidence that, again, these people had stopped time to honour this life.
Yeah. And how different it is now.
And how different it is. Well, I think our ancestors recognised that how we look after the dead is not just about them, it's about us. It's about us. What does it say about us as creatures?
I mean, you think even going back to Victorian times, and they had, they had mourn and jewellery, for example. They wore jet. Jet was used, to wear black pieces. People were in black and so people knew that this family were in mourning and treated them with a bit more caution and a bit more sort of respect. And people marked that. And then think of the death rate. In Victorian times, how higher it would have been. People would have been dying younger, so it was much more commonplace.
Yep. But it still was seen as something that we have to pay attention to, and that we have to come together for. Because even those, thousands of years old burials, people would probably have come together to pray and to sing and to chant and to honour. They would have done that as a community. Now that has evolved in some way to modern day funerals where we have photo slideshows and we have what's his name, belting out My Way, Frank Sinatra belting out My Way, but I love that. It becomes a reflection of who the person was in life. So if they were quiet and quite private, then it's a quiet private ceremony, and if they were all singing, all dancing, then that's what it becomes. But just this idea, as you say, that we come together in community and we pause for a minute to honour that life and to show that we as a society care for our dead is hugely important. And when it comes to direct cremations, when we remove the ceremony, when we hide death away because it's inconvenient or because we want to save money, then I think we lose something ancient and something that's necessary.
Yeah. We need to sort of treat the wound, if you like, the wound of someone being taken from us. And to do that, I think we do have to have a ceremony of some kind.
And as you have, led almost, it must be coming up in almost 2,000 funerals or somewhere thereabout. And you see just what a difference it makes for family and friends when you come together, when that space is held in the right way, when these words you use become a bridge between, this unbearable space between life and death. When people are sitting there, they are so discombobulated, they're sad, they're angry, where's this person going, they're confused. That's all necessary. We need a space for that. And if we don't, and ceremony is a space for that, as we know, if we don't have that, what do we have?
Nothing. We have unresolved grief.
Absolutely.
We have, in months, might be years to come, where it hits them like a steam train, and it's what's happened. I've not processed this properly. And I'm not saying that a funeral or a ceremony is a cathartic cure-all, because it's not, but it's a starting point. It's a focus. It's the simple matter of bringing people together to give comfort, say a few kind words to a person, to acknowledge the grief that they are facing, and to remember a life as well. Yeah.
And we mentioned at the beginning that it's often money that's the driver for it. And that's how it's marketed. It's much cheaper. And it is much cheaper. It's much cheaper. But here's the thing. It's not the ceremony that costs all the money.
Exactly.
So if we take an average ceremony, a cremation ceremony in Scotland's about £5,000, right? £5,000.
That's right.
Not an inconsiderable amount of money, right? For anybody. But if we break that down, 50 to 60% of that, sometimes upwards of that, goes directly to the funeral director. And that's for the funeral director's fee, for, orchestrating the whole thing, for cars, for the coffin, for plaques, for all the wee things that the funeral director offers and families accept. 20 to 30% of that goes to the crematorium. And that's because you are booking out their space to have your ceremony, and the body's going to be cremated. So you need that space. 10 to 20% goes to flowers and orders of service. And of course, I did a funeral recently where there were 3 bunches of flowers on top of the coffin. So there was a spray, and then there was 2 smaller bunches of flowers. £900. Almost 4 times what they were paying for me to lead that full ceremony. And then 3 to 4% of that £5,000 goes to the celebrant. Yeah. For conducting the whole ceremony. 3 to 4%. So celebrants, by and large, get somewhere between £160 and to £250. Is that fair?
That's about right, yeah.
In Scotland, between £160 to £250. In a minute, we'll talk about what they get for that. But what that means is the ceremony itself is not what's costing the money. It's all the add-ons.
Yes.
By everybody else.
Orders of service are a particular one that people feel they have to have an order of service.
And flowers.
And flowers.
And then they just get eaten by the deer afterwards.
People don't even take them.
They don't
a lot of the time home. They'll go in the garden of remembrance at the crematorium, and in a few days they lose their bloom. They don't look as nice as they had been.
So I'll tell you what I did for that ceremony. So I got £250 for that ceremony. That's my fee as a funeral celebrant. Bearing in mind the flowers cost £900. So for that £250, I had my initial meeting with the family. It was a 50-mile round trip to go and see them. So I sat with them for a few hours, talking about everything they wanted for the logistics of the ceremony, the music, the photos, who was saying what, who was doing what, and then all about the person's life. So that takes time, right? We know that. It takes
a couple of hours at least.
At least a couple of hours. And this family wanted a photo slideshow, but they didn't know how to get the photos on. So they kind of scanned the photos and sent them to me, but then when I got home I realised that they were all overexposed. So I had to do another 50-mile round trip to go back and scan the photos onto my phone to do it right. And I never charged them any more money for that. I could have, I probably should have, but I never. So that was 2 50-mile round trips which takes up your time, an hour there, an hour back, you know, the time you spend, all the hours spent with the family. The music they wanted was quite, I don't mean obscure, but it was a family member playing an instrument. So I have to email Obitus, which is the audiovisual system that the crematorium uses. Can you find this? So that takes time for you to sit. And I had to send maybe 6 or 7 emails because they couldn't find the right versions of different songs. So that takes your time, right? Then there's the writing it, which can easily take a full day. Easily take a full day to sit and write, to get it right, to go over it, to read it out loud, because that's what you're going to be doing in the day, to check it against all your paperwork to make sure you haven't made any mistakes. Easily a whole day, if not 2. Then you've got to send it to the family. You've got to wait for that to come back with any changes or additions, and there usually are. You're usually in between this getting texts and emails saying, oh, I forgot to put this in, and Auntie Joan said, could you add this? And there's this story. So you're trying to bring them all together. And then on the day, there's another 50-mile round trip to go down and actually hold space for everybody and to make it look flawless and to create this container that people are going to come out the other side feeling that not only they've honoured that life and honoured that person, but that they feel a wee bit easier in themselves.
Yeah.
So that's just...
Yeah, you break it all down and it's probably a lot less than the minimum wage.
Yeah, it probably is.
It probably is.
Some people think a celebrant's an easy job because you're just getting up from and reading from a book. You're not doing that. And the reason that celebrants don't get paid much money is because, I don't know if you know this, do you know where the fees came from?
No, I don't actually.
So when the humanists first, because they were the first, right, it was always just ministers that did funerals, and then the humanist movement came across from Australia and people here started to be humanists. And they went to funeral directors and they were offering something different. Funeral directors didn't know what they should get in terms of money. So they thought, oh, well, what's a minister getting as a stipend? I don't know if that's the right pronunciation of that word. But so ministers are salaried. They get salary from the church. They get their house. And if they do a ceremony, they get a stipend. And they used to get £160. So the family would give them an envelope with £160 in it. That's where it came from. The funeral director said, we'll give them the same as the minister's getting. But you're not comparing like for like, right?
You can't because usually they're generic and, you know, there's maybe some bit of personalisation in it, but not to the extent that we do it.
They're not going and sitting with the family. There's certainly no adding music and photos and, you know, emailing Obitus to get it right for the family. They're not going back, phoning families, do you need anything else? You know, we'll often put in a wee ritual. Do you want to have a wee dram in there? Have you loved a wee dram? Do you want to have a wee dram? Do you want your guests to have a wee dram? You know, we're always thinking about how can we do more for our families? How can we bring more value? How can we make it a more personal experience? And yet still getting the same stipend as what a minister would get. But it's set by the funeral directors, and it's very difficult to get beyond that, even though celebrants are doing all this extra work. So my point in that is, it's not the ceremony that's costing all the money, and yet that's the bit that they're missing out on.
Exactly. Because
what's happening is the if you have a direct cremation, the whole experience is becoming silent. And I don't mean silent in terms of peaceful silence. I mean in terms of absence.
Ignored.
As you said, no people there to put their hands on the coffin, no shared grief, no putting flowers in vases, no scattering flowers round a grave, no sharing stories, no supporting each other, no hugs. When those hugs at the end of a funeral ceremony, they're some of the loveliest hugs you see, because sometimes people hug and it's just, oh, how are you? And at the end of a funeral, they hug as if they don't want to let go.
And I've noticed that doing a ceremony for a family, you know, for the families, when you finish, you come down from the lectern and you tend to shake hands, but 9 times out of 10, I get a beautiful hug.
Yeah.
Because you've built a relationship with your family, you know, while you're creating their ceremony, and, you know, and it's lovely.
It never fails to amaze me. Now, I was a paramedic for 12 years, and I could count on the one hand the number of times somebody reached out. Now, we didn't have text or all that back then, but the number of times families reached out to say thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Now, either I was a really shit paramedic or, you know, there's something else going on. But how many times have you done a funeral and that very same day when the family should be grieving, they should not be thinking about you because you're just a vessel for their goodbyes to come through? How many times do they either text, email or pick up the phone to say thank you?
More often than not.
More often than not.
And not only that, sometimes I have been presented with a lovely gift or a card, which is totally unexpected, but very welcomed. But, you know, again, it just shows how much they've appreciated
what a difference that has
the
made
ceremony
to them. And I don't think you can underestimate that. And if it's a rites and rituals funeral ceremony, because we try to go beyond just the family. Of course, the family is where our main attention and loyalty is. But we often use ceremony as a way to get people to think about their own lives and their own mortality. If it's a funeral ceremony, their own mortality. But also the people they have in their lives and the love that they're grateful for. And just to remind themselves of that and maybe using that as an opportunity to reach out to people and say, I'm so glad that you're in my life, because you just never know the minute.
You don't.
Right? You just never know the minute. One minute somebody's here and the next minute they're gone. But funeral ceremonies, our funeral ceremonies, can often be a time for us to encourage people to reflect on that and just to think about that love and go away home and just text their mum or phone them. Don't text your mum, phone your mum and say, I just want to say I love you. And I'm really... You know, I'm so happy that you're in my life. I mean, who wouldn't want to hear that? Who wouldn't want to hear that? So funeral ceremonies have the potential for so much healing and so much love and so much kinship to come together in a world that seems so fragmented at the minute. And yet we've got these direct cremations all over the telly going, you know, come to us, it's cheaper.
That's true, because I've been reflecting in my own, you know, sort of practice, and I find it now I'm doing other ceremonies such as marriages and baby namings, it's a slightly easier, but I was always conscious when I was only a funeral celebrant how difficult I would have felt it to market myself. And it doesn't seem to bother the direct cremation companies, but it feels a wee bit one-sided, and that no one's going out there and promoting the cathartic nature of ceremony, what it can bring, how that will enrich, you know, not only the life of the deceased, but also for the family and the grieving process. And there isn't that platform. Nobody does it.
No, and we should do it more.
We should.
We're so polite. I know I'm a really polite person. I don't like upsetting anybody. I don't want to upset funeral directors because then they might not give me any work. You know, let's face it, that's the way celebrants think. I don't want to upset a funeral director because they might not give me any work. But we should speak out about it more, because we do have that lived experience of the difference it can make to a family when they come together in ceremony. We know that. We do. We're doing ceremonies all the time. We do ceremonies online. We do ceremonies with each other. We do spiritual practice on our own. We know the difference it can make when you sit down and connect with each other, with the God energy, with this idea of an afterlife, whatever that might mean to people. We know how powerful that can be. And yet there's this commercial movement sweeping in and saying, nah, you don't need any of that. You don't need, and that's what costs the money. So what you could do, if you did want to do that, if somebody did want to have a direct cremation, you could still have the ceremony. You could just say to the funeral director, okay, we're going to do that, but see, at the same time, we're going to book the village hall for £100. We're going to get a settlement for £250, and we're still going to have this beautiful, beautiful ceremony. So it's not costing you thousands of pounds, but you're still getting
a ceremony.
What is you need. I remember, and this was, goodness me, I hadn't been practicing that long as a celebrant, but a funeral director phoning me and saying, I've got a ceremony for you, but it's quite a difficult one because he wanted a direct cremation. But his family, they just can't do that. They just, it's too much for them. They're grieving too much. They need something. And so I went to see them, and they were very clear that no stories, no memories, nothing, because he didn't want that. He was very clear in what he wanted, but they needed something. And so there's always a way, right? If you go out your own way, if you get, sidestep your ego, there's, and by that I mean, I have to say the right thing, I have to come up with the right. If you just meet them where they are, you open your heart, you open your mind, there's always a way. And so the one thing I knew about this man was that he'd been a teacher. And I did ask, can I say he was a teacher? No. Can I say this? No. So it came down to, no, you can't say anything. And I did say to them, he left behind his wife and his 2 grown-up daughters. What can we say? And they were just distraught. They said, we don't know. His house was full of books because he was a teacher, an English teacher. And they were full of, I was sitting in this room surrounded by books that were full of poetry and beautiful readings. And I said, let's just sit for a wee while. Let's just sit and see what comes to us. And after a wee while, I said to them, why don't we do this? Why don't each of the 3 of you choose a reading or a poem and give it to me along with just a few lines about why you're choosing it? And that's what we did. And it was such a beautiful, powerful, deep ceremony. Because we started off by saying, there was quite a few people there, we started off by saying, before he died, he said he couldn't think of anything worse than somebody didn't know getting up and talking about him. And everybody laughed. So in that moment, they recognised him and who he was. And I said, so to honour his wishes, today's ceremony is going to be a wee bit different. Instead of looking back on his life and who he was and what school he went to, we, his wife and his daughters have each picked something, and they're going to share a few words about why. And it was just beautiful. We had Keats' Ode to Autumn, we had Montaigne's Death and the Art of Living, and we had one of Shakespeare's sonnets.
That is lovely.
It was
because
so lovely.
You're getting the essence of who he was without spelling it out in a kind of chronological way.
Nobody that left there knew what school he went to, what he did when he left work, what date he get married, all these things that we often hear in ceremonies. There's nothing wrong with that if a family wants to have that, of course. But we didn't do anything to dishonour his wishes. But his family got what they needed from it. They felt that they were honouring their journey with him. And again, it's this question, who's a funeral for? Is it for the dead? Is it for the living? I think it's for both. But I think it's really important that the people who are left behind get the chance to honour what that person meant to them. And as we said earlier, it says so much about who we are as human beings. We might be the first people in human history that are saying farewell to our loved ones with nothing, without pausing.
Do you think that's because as a society we've kind of stepped back from religion a bit?
Step back from faith, step back from religion. I don't think we've lost our need, our hunger for something greater. We see that all the time in ceremony, particularly funeral ceremonies, when people need meaning. They're trying to make sense of what's happened. And they need to do something that creates meaning for them. And that's what funerals do as well, don't they? They create meaning for people. So I don't think people have lost their hunger for spirituality. They might not say that word, but I don't think they've lost their hunger for that. But of course, what they don't want is people preaching to them. They don't want to have a ceremony that's just talking about God that they don't worship or don't understand. They don't want to have to say prayers that they've no, or hymns that they've no connection with. They want it to be a reflection in the person's life. They want it to be very personal and very meaningful, and not to feel just superficial.
Yeah, that's true, because even in my lifetime, when I was young, predominance of ceremonies were church-based of either denomination, in the west of Scotland. And like that, sometimes you could go and you didn't feel that the person was front and centre. But nowadays, with us, especially us in rites and rituals, the person is front and centre. The wishes of the family are front and centre. They're totally bespoke, anything that we do.
Yeah.
Hence the time it takes.
Absolutely. And I'm thinking, just when you were saying that, another funeral I did a couple of years ago, and I had done the wife's funeral and now the husband died. And he was a practising Catholic his whole life. When he died, he had left wishes with his family that he didn't want a full Catholic funeral. He wanted me to do his funeral at crematorium. But he wanted to have a mass before it. So he actually approached the priest and said, this is the way I want to do it. Can I do it? And the priest said, yes, you can, which is really good, right? A bit of flexibility. So I thought, so say the funeral was at 12 o'clock at Stirling Crematorium, and the mass was going to be at 11 o'clock at the chapel. So I thought, I'll go to the chapel and I will take part in the mass, because that way when we go up to the crematorium, it's a continuity. It's not like a start again ceremony. We just continue, and I can refer back to, we've just been together in the chapel, yada yada. And so I got there very early. I got there at 10:30. The beautiful music was already playing. The organ music was playing. It was lovely. There were people there already praying. They had their rosary beads and they were praying. I sat away at the back. Of course, you have this gorgeous sacred energy of this building, because these old religious buildings have such sacred energy, don't they? And then it came, and the coffin was at the front there. The coffin was at the front, and then, it came to the time when there was no obvious start to the ceremony. Like we're in ceremony, and I'm very big in training. It has a beginning, it has a middle, and it has an end. And those two things are very important. You just don't start, like wheezing into it, and people are like, oh, is that it? Has it started? And you don't just stop, mid-sentence, and everybody's got to know it's finished. You have to make it very clear. It's like a circle, and you have to close that loop. But all of a sudden, the sort of ceremony had started. The priest came out. What surprised me was he never addressed the family. He never looked towards the family. He never acknowledged their grief. He never acknowledged the coffin being there. He went through a set of, what would you say?
Rote learning.
Yeah, he just went through, he opened a book and he read for this book the way he had, I don't know how many times before. There was no connection, for me, no connection with the words. No connection with the person sitting in front of him and what these words were meant to do for that man and for his family. It was devoid
of heart.
Of heart, of soul, of depth, of meaning. And it didn't even, I don't know that if I had been somebody who was there because of my Catholic faith, I don't know that would have filled up my cup, my spiritual cup.
Well, I've had several experiences of going to a Catholic funeral and like that, come back and thought, yeah, that could have been anybody. And two, in my celebrant, sort of journey, has been my own mum. My mum was a practising Catholic. And so when she passed away, I had not long been a celebrant, but I was conscious that I wanted to honour my mum and do her funeral with my sister's full support. So we went down to see a priest who, I'm not going to go into detail, but he failed her in her last years of life, didn't visit her, and she was blind, and it was horrible. But anyway, we knew this was important to mum. So down we went, and the plan was going to be that the priest she would have a mass, her body would be taken into the church, and then I would go and do a celebration of life at Clyde Coast Crematorium. The priest was very offhand, to the point of being rude. Said no, she couldn't come into church if I was doing the ceremony. He more or less said I couldn't have a la carte. We couldn't have a la carte. No, that she wasn't to come into church. And immediately my sister and my sister totally supported me, which was great. We agreed that it made more sense and it meant more to us and to the family that we did the ceremony. You know, obviously I conducted it, but my sister was, you know, huge and, you know, writing the eulogy. But he sent us away and said, what can you give your mother that the Catholic Church can't give her? And I says, plenty. He says, I believe in the resurrection. I says, I believe in a celebration of life. And he refused to let her body come into church. But we did have a mass, and again, it was very, very cold. And I thought, you know, that this would have been an older generation's thing. But this priest was decades younger than me. And, you know, we felt, for us, you know, we felt that Mum had, you know, we did her proud, as we thought. And everyone reflected on, yeah, it was Mum, and we were able to, you know, celebrate her life. But I thought for a woman who had blindly trusted her faith for years since she was born, that they didn't do right by her.
It makes me angry. It makes me sad. It's a story I've heard over and over again. You go to see a family and they'll go, she was a practicing, but the last couple of years the church has no come anywhere near her. So we don't want a church funeral. You know, you hear that again and again. I don't want to say too much, but one of our celebrants this week had the same thing.
Yep.
Where she had been asked to hold the ceremony, the funeral ceremony. It was going to be in a church, and then when the minister found out, it was no, you're not doing this. No, absolutely not. It's
my ball.
It's my ball, and you're not getting it. And it's such a missed opportunity, because actually, if the minister had been willing to sit down with you, if the priest had been willing to sit down with you and say, how do we do this together? How do we bring both aspects of this, and her faith in the Catholic Church, and your experience as her daughter, and how she walked through life? How powerful could that have been?
Exactly.
And it's such a missed opportunity. And it's why people are turning away from the church in their droves. I don't understand it. I don't understand how they can't see it.
I don't either.
Because the church, and that is the good thing about the church, if it's working right, is a community. They do so much for the community, and the community comes together. And, you know, there's a wee church in the village where I live, and, you know, they're always putting on wee bake sales and, you know, inviting people along, and the ladies of the kirk are doing all the cooking. And I know when I was diagnosed with cancer, and I don't even go to the church, I keep saying I'm going to go every Sunday, but when I was diagnosed with cancer, they chatted my door and gave me a bunch of flowers. And they said, we heard, and we just went, and I thought, how lovely is that you are in somebody's thoughts, that somebody, a community have sat down and said, there's somebody in our village that's gone through this. It would be nice for us to recognise that and just let them know we're thinking about them. That's what the church should be, but not closing themselves off.
Yeah. Certainly in Houston, where I live, the local church is very much like your own experience. They do a food bank. They do like that. When my dad died, and my mum and my brother-in-law, I was given flowers. When my mum had died, one of the ladies in the church came round with homemaking for me. You know, again, looking out for you.
Yeah. And that's the way that it should be. I was just reminded, sorry, I'm laughing, of a story that I got told when I first became a celebrant up in Falkirk Crematorium. And it was how a minister was doing a ceremony one day up there, and it was a time when they used CDs for the music.
Yeah.
And the minister said, oh, you know, what song is it? And it was My Bay, Frank Sinatra. And the minister said, no, you're not playing that. And the guys, and there was two old guys in the crematorium, and they said, what do you mean we're not playing it? We're playing it, that's what they've asked for. And they said, no, because it's no his way, you know, pointing to the deceased in the coffin. it's his way.
Wow.
And one of the guys in the crematorium said, well, until he's fucking paying for it, it's going on.
Brilliant.
It's his way and it's going
Absolutely brilliant.
But there are so many wee stories like that we hear, and we don't want to be knocking the church or faith in any way, shape or form, but there's so many wee stories we've heard that have denied families something they need from the very people that should be delivering it.
Yeah. I heard a story once, similar local crematorium, that a family had ordered a photo tribute, which I think is a lovely part of the ceremony, you know, your reflection. And sometimes I think people seeing the photographs, that just adds an extra dimension. And
especially if there's bits in the story that they can connect to the photograph.
Yeah, and the tune and the tune that they have, the music they have to go with it. So anyway, this family had booked a photo tribute, which is not an insignificant cost. It was approximately about £100, but it is lovely.
Yeah.
And the priest refused to work Wesley and play the track. So luckily enough, the crematorium attendant says, well, we'll do it. So I had to come in and made it so obvious that the priest wasn't doing it. They come in and operated the photo tribute.
I just don't understand it. One of my friends from school, her dad died, and they asked me to do the funeral, and then somebody in the family decided they wanted to have it in the church, but the minister said I could deliver the eulogy. And again, I got there, and the whole thing was so cold up to the point of the eulogy. Didn't even mention my friend's dad's name. You know, and we always think that's such an important part in the ceremony, is mentioning the name. It's a bit like the ancient Egyptians. If you just want to keep somebody alive, say their name 3 times. But when you say their name out loud in the first few lines of the ceremony, to me, you're calling them into the room.
Yep.
You're calling their soul, their energy, their essence into the room and saying, this is for you.
Yep.
So it's really, really important, I think. Didn't mention his name, didn't look at the family, didn't acknowledge their grief, all the things that we would do in ceremony. And I got up and delivered the eulogy, and then back to him. It was just prayers, you know, the usual, you know, sermons and prayers and things like that. And then we were going from there up to the graveyard, and I was taking the ceremony up at the graveyard, but I assumed that he would be coming because he's the minister. He's been asked to hold space as a minister. And so I said to him, are you travelling up there yourself or something like that? I'll see you up there. And he said, oh, I'm not going to the graveside. And I said, oh no. He said, no, I'm loaded with a cold. I'm going home.
Wow. And
I just thought, oh my goodness, you just have no idea of what's happening here. No, and that's not the right way to put it. You are so detached from what is happening here, that a life has moved on, that a family are grieving, that this is the time when the world stops for us to recognise that and to honour that and to say goodbye, and you're just, no, I'm away home in my bed. And we hear those stories again and again, and we don't want to be minister bashing by any means.
No, but
the take home from this is ceremony matters.
Yes.
Ceremony is important.
Mm-hmm. And equally, there are people of organised religion out there that do a wonderful job.
Wonderful job.
Yeah, but again, I think the key is they get it. They get what ceremony means.
Yeah.
They get the transition, the thresholds, moving from one life to the one earthly sphere to the next, and they get that.
But here's the thing: everybody that's holding space for ceremony should get it.
Mm-hmm.
That's the problem. Should. I mean, because don't get us wrong, you get celebrants that are not that great either. You know, you get really, really good celebrants, you get really, really poor celebrants, and you get everything in between, and the ministry's just the same. But to me, everybody who's standing up there holding space for ceremony should get ceremony.
Yeah.
They should understand what ceremony is. They should understand the power of ceremony, and they should understand what's coming through them, what's been asked of them, what's needed by this family, what's needed by this congregation or the mourners or whatever you want to say. They should at least get that.
Yeah. And again, you leave your ego at the door.
Completely. Right. Do you want to say anything? Because I think we must have come, wait to sneakily look at my... 3 minutes.
Wow.
3 minutes away. What are we like? Anything you want to close by? Because if you are somebody in your family's had a direct cremation or wants a direct cremation and you want to honour that, I'm not saying you shouldn't do that, but there are also ways of you finding meaning in that, that time, and there are ways that you can either on your own in ritual or, as I say, booking a village hall or getting somebody to come to your house or coming together in community in some way, even if you just get everybody for a meal and you just talk about that person.
That's like even the pub round and get a round of drinks up for their friend, and sit and tell stories about what the person did, anything like that, or a walk in the country, even just going out in nature and to a place that they loved,
and setting your intention to honour that person through that walk. There are different ways you can do it. If you're not sure, you can reach out to hello@rightsandrituals.co.uk. We'll help you. But thank you for joining, and
thank you.
As always, go on your soul.